Today we are going to see how uh, to draw the schema diagram for your this first lab program. So we have given a library database, and for the following schema, for following tables, we need to draw which are dependent and which are independent tables so that we can create the tables in that order. So if you see here the book, and we will draw the schema for this. So book ID, title, publisher name, and publication year. Then with book authors, there is book ID and author name. So we have drawn that book ID and author name. So in the same way, we have drawn the schema diagram for all the tables. Okay, for all the tables. Now we need to identify the dependency. So if you look at after drawing that the schema, so book author is dependent on your book ID. So book is the one where the information about the book is there, its title and publisher name, and it depends on your book ID. So publisher, it has name, address, and phone number. It doesn't have any other attributes which are dependent on any other table. So it is a independent table. So it is independent from any other table, and hence we can start with the publisher table. So we can create a publisher table, then only I can add the information about publisher name in your book table. So that's why it is a dependent on your publisher name. So I can create the first table like this. So I cannot create, the moment you create it, the publisher name is not available to you. So we cannot create it. So we will create this table first, and after that second table has to be created as book. Then you can create book authors, because book authors is again dependent on your book table. So that is what our these tables. Then book copies. So book copies is dependent on book ID, means after having a book information, then only we can issue a book or copies of book to the students. So it is dependent on that table. So book ID. Then there is a program ID and number of copies. Now, since program is nothing but is that book belongs to your CSE program or electronics or mechanical or civil or any other branches or maybe a programs. So hence this is dependent one, because a library program is the one table which has the information about your program, means the program ID and program name and address, which is independent one. So we have to create this first, then only I will get the information about my program ID. So you have a branch, then only there are books available in the branch. You cannot tell that there is already book available and we have created that branch. No. So that is why this is dependent on again this. So what we can do is book copies we cannot create directly because program ID is not available, and hence the library program is created first. So it is an independent table. So that's why program ID is dependent on, means book copies program ID is dependent on library program ID. So these are all primary keys what we are talking here. This is a primary key. Okay, so this is a primary key because it is all are dependent on this. Now this book ID is actually a reference key, so it is dependent one. Okay, so this is a primary key and this is reference key. And publisher name, yes, it is a primary key because the arrow, if you are seeing, and it is a primary key, but publisher name here is a reference key. It is dependent on this. Okay, so book ID is a reference key, then program ID is a reference, so means it is dependent on here this program ID. Then book lending, in that table we have a book ID, program ID, and card number. So these are all again dependent on this. So what we can do is we can create library program, then you either create a book copies or book lending, because these two tables are again independent to each other, they are not dependent one. Okay, so we can create this. So hence we have created first uh, the publisher, then book authors, then we have created library program, then either you create book copies book lending in any other order. So first is publisher one, or you can start with library program anywhere. So I will start with publisher first, then book second, book authors as third, then library program as four, then book copies as five, book lending as six. So that is how we can create this order. So these are all foreign keys. Then what about these all underlined? All three are underlined. That means they are like the whole these three values, they should be unique one. So book ID as well as program ID and card number, the combination of these three should be unique. Okay, so that is what the table is suggesting us. Means the book ID and program ID, this combination has to be unique, and book ID and author name, that combination has to be unique. So while creating, we will observe how this can be created. So that is what the schema diagram of your first lab program.